Hi, this is the Hackme Vectr. It's a 3D sensing controller and sequencer for Eurorack modular synthesizers. Vectr is a really complex module, but it's also a very simple module at the basic level, so this is just an overview to get you familiar with some of the basic functionality. So Vectr is a 3D sensor, so it senses your hand in 3 dimensions. The area that it senses in is outlined by the dots here. So that's the whole area, and then it's about 6 inches, which is about 15 centimeters away that it senses. The LEDs here give you feedback, so red is how close your hand is, and then blue shows you, tracks your hand as it moves around in the XY axis. So I can show you what I can control with it. So if I plug a pitch into the x-axis, so I can control that. And I plug a filter cutoff into the y-axis. I can control one at a time just by keeping my hand still in one direction, or I can do them both. So now I'm going to add another parameter on the z-axis, so now I can control 3 things at the same time. So Vectr has a menu system which allows you to configure the behaviors of these different outputs. So I can change the different parameters. So in the menu system, you saw I entered it by double tapping on the bottom. There are main menus and sub-menus. There's a lot of different options here. The main menus are above the cross lines. You can see this one says X/SRC for source. So that this is the X main menu. The sub-menus for the X menu are on the right side, below the lines on the right side. So if I select the X by pushing in the encoder, now the sub-menu LED is blinking, and I can select range or quantization or linearity, the slew rate, or a hold behavior. So if I select range, now the menu options across the top are showing me the X options. And across the very top line it says -5 to +5, -2.5 volts to +2.5 volts, 0 to 5 volts, or 0 to 1 volts, or this ramp behavior which involves the sequencer. So I could change it to a 0 to 1 volt range. So now the X has much less an effect. If I wanted to keep that, I would push the encoder knob in, but if I want to back out without saving it, I push the other switch. Now it's back to a 0 to 5 volts on the x-axis. Vectr is also a sequencer, so it could be triggered internally or externally. In the internal mode, you use the switch here, and it starts recording when I push the button, and stops recording when I push the button again. And in this mode, it immediately starts playing that sequence back as a loop. I could change that looping behavior so that it played in a pendulum mode or in a flip mode. I could change it so that it was a one-shot behavior. Vectr could also be a sequencer. So if I take this pitch out of here and plug it into a sequencer, and then I connect the clock of that sequencer to Vectr. Vectr is putting out 16 steps here, so it's going to be 16-step sequence. And I can speed that sequence up by making gestures, by moving my hand clockwise in the circle it goes faster, and by moving my hand counterclockwise in a circle I can slow it back down again. And I could start and stop this sequence by pushing the encoder knob in. I can go back to the live mode by turning the knob to the right. I could hold the position by turning it to the left, and I could start it again by turning it back to the left again, and then push the encoder knob and the sequence starts playing over again. There's a number of performance modes in Vectr, so I could overdub the sequence by double tapping in the center. And Vectr gives you the option to overdub each axis independently. So I could overdub the X, the Y, or the Z, one of them, two of them, or all three of them at the same time. I'll plug something back into X. So I'll just record the X axis. So this is X, Y, and Z. So if I push the button now, overdubbing is running, and it will start when my hand enters the sensor area. So it's kind of like a punch in and punch out behavior. So that just got added in. Vectr could also be synchronized to external stuff, so I'd get out of overdubbing mode, it's back into playing mode. So I have an LFO set up, and I could take the signal out of that LFO and plug it into my record input, and then I can change the recording behavior by going into the menu to change the recording source to external, and then when I push the button it's going to arm recording, and then it's going to start recording when the first edge comes in, and I'll push it again and it'll stop on the next edge after I push it again. So you see it's armed, now it's recording, push it again and it's going to stop on the next edge and start playing that sequence back again. So I can take that same signal and run it into the sync input, and that will cause the playback to synchronize to that LFO. And if I adjust that LFO frequency, I'm getting a shorter and shorter sequence, which is can play with all kinds of different things and behaviors about the playback. There's also a modulation input, so if I take that same signal, plug it into the modulation input, now it's modulating the speed with a triangle wave. So that's the basics of Vectr. Stay tuned for more videos showing deeper behaviors, but I just wanted to show you guys some of these basics. I hope you like it. It's super fun, really fun way to interact with your synthesizer, and I hope you guys have a good time.